As
Madam
I'll
Secretary.
ever be.
Okay, great.
Okay.
All right. Good morning to all attending the RTA's virtual meeting of our Board of Directors. The Governor's emergency declaration remains in force during the current COVID-19 pandemic, and pursuant to his executive order or orders declaring a public health emergency and recent amendments to the Open Meetings Act, we continue to operate under permission to meet without physical attendance requirements. So as the head of this public body, I declare it's not prudent to have any staff or any member of the board at our headquarters during this meeting. So we will proceed with an online sanctioned meeting, and I'll review the guidelines for today's meetings. Keep your audio on mute as much as possible to minimize, if you would, background noise, which may impair the recording of this meeting. When you have a question or comment, please raise your virtual hand, and the Secretary, Audrey, will call on you and one at a time. When she calls on you, lower your hand and unmute before you begin speaking. And when we get to voting, please raise your hand. I'll prompt you to make a motion or a second. And Audrey will, the Secretary will identify who's making the motion and second. And after she announces that you've made the motion or second, please remember to turn off your lowered hand icon. Are there any questions at this time?
No hands.
Great. Seeing that, I will now officially call the meeting of the Board of Directors of the Regional Transportation Authority of Northeastern Illinois together. And I will recite the Pledge of Allegiance. You can keep yourself on mute. I look forward to when we can get back and stand together to do this. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Madam Secretary, will you please call the roll?
Certainly. Director Andalcio?
Here.
Director Canty?
Here.
Director Carey?
Present.
Director Colson?
Here.
Director Frega?
Here.
Director Fuentes? Director Gathing?
Present.
Director Groven?
Here.
Director Holt?
Here.
Director Cotel? Director Lewis?
Here.
Director Melvin?
Here.
Director Pang?
Here.
Director Ross?
Here.
Director Sager?
Here.
Chairman Dillard?
Present.
We have a quorum of 14 present with 2 absent.
Great, thank you. Item 3A is the approval of the minutes from the board meeting held on March 18th, 2021. The Secretary sent out and the staff sent out a revised version to share with the board in advance of today's meeting. So I'll look for, if there are no questions, a motion to approve the revised minutes of the March 18th meeting. I have a motion and a second, unless anyone has any comments, corrections, or additions.
Director Andalcio moves and Director Melvin seconds. If you would lower your hands now, please. Thank you.
Great. So, Madam Secretary, if we have a motion and a second, will you please take the roll?
Certainly. Director Andalcio?
Aye.
Director Canty?
Aye.
Director Carey?
Aye.
Director Colson?
Aye.
Director Frega?
Aye. Aye.
Director Gathing?
Aye.
Director Groven?
Aye.
Director Holt?
Aye.
Director Lewis?
Yes.
Director Melvin?
Yes.
Director Payne,
Yes.
Director Ross,
Aye.
Director Sager,
Yes.
Chairman Dillard,
Yes,
14 ayes and 2 absent.
great. The March minute meetings are therefore approved. This month, we're going to make a slight change in the order of our meeting. Leanne will provide the executive director's report first, and then she'll introduce our public comment speakers. So with that, I will turn it over to Leanne. Good morning, Leanne.
Good morning, Chairman Dillard and members of the board. Hope everyone's having a good morning. I guess a split between sunny and gloomy day, depending on where you are in the region. So it's still chilly. That's all I know. I'm looking forward to spring. But I want to start by, first of all, congratulating our finance team and comptroller for once again receiving the Certificate of Achievement for Excellence in the final reporting from the Government Finance Officers Association. This is the 26th consecutive year that we've received this certificate, and I really think what this shows to us is evidence of our consistent commitment to the financial work that we do, the reporting work that we do. So congratulations to that team. Today, you'll also hear from staff on 2 projects that directly respond to the COVID crisis and our work to support the region's recovery from it. Community planning staff are going to discuss this year's slate of projects that were selected as part of a call with CMAP, or the Chicago Metropolitan Agency for Planning, and their local technical assistance program. You probably recall we partner with them when we do a joint call for projects across the region to make it easier for local entities and municipalities to think about what they might want to apply for and specifically with projects. This year's joint call targeted high and very high need communities as part of our coordinated regional response to the pandemic. Second, you're going to hear about the results of our COVID-19 ridership survey, whose full findings were released today. And this is the first region-wide survey of current and lapsed transit riders since the pandemic began, and will directly inform our long-term strategic planning that we begin as we move into step 3 of our recovery strategy. Another important project that you're going to learn a little bit more about today is the launch of our completely redesigned mapping and data portal, which we love our acronyms in transportation, RTMs as we call it. Staff are going to demonstrate this important new tool for delivering the data and watching trends. RTMs is also a cornerstone of our commitment to transparency and accountability as an agency as a whole. And we hope that you and others will find it and continue to find it a valuable resource. It really looks good, and it's, I think, just a much needed refresh and update. So before I discuss the legislative update, I want to touch briefly on where we're at with our recovery strategy related work. As a reminder, with the allocation of the CRISA funds during last month's board meeting, we effectively wrapped up step 2 in our strategy, and that allowing us to close the remaining budget gaps for the 2021 budget. Sorry, guys. Yeah, I wasn't saying next slide. So next slide, please. Thanks. So this month, as part of our initial step 3 work, the performance-based programming committee, consisting of staff from the RTA and the 3 service boards, are meeting regularly to discuss revising the capital investment framework that will lay out the method for allocating funding, the capital funding for years 25 and 26. We expect to come to you with a recommendation on that process in May, followed by public comment with board action expected for June. In June this year, staff will also present the timeline, the process, and the initial goals for the key activities and more detailed activities associated beyond that for the rest of step 3, which will really be the development and the adoption of an update to our strategic plan. So next slide, please. And moving on to the legislative front, as has been the case now for many months, there has been a lot of activity on the federal front relevant to transit. On March 31st, President Biden unveiled the outline of his large-scale infrastructure investment proposal. The $2 trillion proposal contains broad investments in surface transportation, water, and other infrastructure as well. The plan sets aside about $85 billion for investment in the nation's transit systems and an additional $80 billion for the country's passenger railroads. The plan also rolled out acknowledgement of the need to invest in existing transit infrastructure and specifically noted a high percentage of transit assets that are beyond the useful life in this country. And as all of you on our board know, we absolutely fit into that category. The US Department of Transportation has indicated that approximately 2/3 of transit investments would be directed towards state of good repair projects, with another $5 billion set aside for transit accessibility investments. The White House has also indicated that the proposed infrastructure spending would be in addition to the amounts already authorized under the FAST Act, or as part of a new reauthorization package that will be hopefully considered for later this year also. Of particular interest in President Biden's proposal is the emphasis on electrification of transit. If funded, it would replace 50,000 diesel transit vehicles nationwide with electric vehicles. In our region, those investments could help accelerate electrifying all the vehicles. And possibly also could support CTA's planned transition to an all-electric fleet by 2040, as an example. This would be an important advancement regarding the environment and public health at large. While the administration's proposal would be a transformative investment in transit, many political hurdles would need to be overcome to bring that plan to fruition. We continue to stay engaged with the administration, with the Illinois delegation, with our national association as discussions continue over the next several months. And turning to Springfield, the Illinois General Assembly returned to session last week after a 2-week spring break. The legislature plans to primarily return to in-person legislating with extensive COVID restrictions in place throughout all of April and May. We will continue to keep you updated as FY22 budget negotiations and other legislative initiatives evolve over the coming months. So next slide, please. And very quickly, here are the state's delinquency figures for this month. Through the end of March, the state owes the RTA $189.4 million in the combination of debt service and public transportation fund payments. The state is about 9 months behind on the debt service payments and the equivalent of 3 months behind on the PTF. The year-to-date cost of covering that short-term debt is $900,000. And next slide, final slide. Oh, yes. So as the chairman noted, before I end my report, we move to public comment, I'd like to briefly introduce the next agenda item. A few months ago, we were approached by a group of residents concerned about climate change and the role of it with respect to the transit system. They had requested to make a presentation to you as part of our regular public comment opportunity. As with any public comment, the RTA doesn't endorse or negate the material presented, but as a public body, we encourage the public to participate and welcome public comment. So today, as part of that public comment, you will hear from Pam Tate, who is joined by Kim Stone. They are both members of the Vehicle Electrification Task Force, which is part of a broader program called the Climate Reality Project. They asked us for 15 minutes with you, and we agreed to give them 15 minutes to present to you. So we welcome them to do so now. With that, that concludes my report. And Mr. Chairman, I can turn it back to you, or we can just turn it straight over to Pam Tate.
Let's just hear directly from Pam. Thank you, Pam, for being with us this morning. Really appreciate it.
Good morning, and thanks very much for inviting us. And I know this is a busy meeting, so Kim and I, Kim is on the line, Kim and I really appreciate it. The next slide, please, on today's agenda. we're going to briefly review for you the causes and impacts of global warming so that you can see the nature of the crisis. And then in the second section, we're going to talk about the benefits of electric buses, which many of you know. And we're also going to discuss what the RTA can do to address this. The next slide, I do want to show you a picture of the Earth's atmosphere seen from the International Space Station. And I show you that because that blue area is the atmosphere. That is a very thin layer of atmosphere around the planet. In fact, if you drove a car straight up, you get to the end of it in about 10 minutes. So it's not that big. And in the next slide, you will see that every day we're dumping 110 million tons of man-made global warming pollution into that atmosphere. And it's happening again every single day. Can you do the next slide, please, where we show you where these greenhouse gases are coming from. And they are coming from many sectors, but the only one we're going to talk a bit more about today is transportation, which accounts for 29% of the greenhouse gases in the United States. And so in the next slide, what you'll see is that the danger goes beyond just climate impact. The danger of greenhouse gases is air pollution from vehicle emissions, which increases the risk of cancer and respiratory issues like asthma and bronchitis. And as many of you know, the Chicago area has been rated very poorly for its air quality. Next slide, please. You will see that it's not only related to respiratory issues, but it's also related to COVID-19. There have been several studies, but the one I'm showing you is a study of 324 cities in China, where they found a 15 to 22% increase in COVID-19 cases where there were elevated levels of particulate pollution. And so we know that in that study and others, that this is a contributor to people getting COVID-19. The next slide shows you, though, the major thing we'll discuss today, which is the extreme weather impacts of global warming, many of which I'm sure you've experienced. The heat waves and hurricanes and rainstorms and flooding and droughts and destructive wildfires like we've seen in California and Australia. In the next slide, I did want to show you an example of one this one's recently from Glasgow, Montana. And we've seen many more of these supercell storms with columns of rain at the center that are very intense and very destructive. In the next slide, you'll see that all over the world, these massive precipitation events are increasing. And you can see the graph there. There'll be new information coming out for 2020 shortly. But in the United States, extreme downpours are now happening 30% more often, and they are also 10% more intense on average. So if that's what you think you're seeing, you're probably correct. In the next slide, you'll see that this is also a financial problem. US farmers, for example, were prevented from planting on 20 million acres in 2019, mainly due to heavy rainfall and flooding. And the insurance companies have taken note because that alone has cost them $6.4 billion just in 2019 in payouts for crop insurance. So insurance companies are taking this quite seriously. In the next slide, we'll just sum it up and explain that globally floods and rainfall is now occurring in this extreme way 4 times more often than in 1980. Next slide will show you the impact on the Midwest, the projected impact. This was done by the 4th National Assessment released by the EPA. And as a major source of agriculture, you will know that the area is very damaged by severe heat and too much or too little rain. And if you take a look at the next slide, you'll just see one picture of that kind of damage from extreme heat in the growing season. And we will see more and more of that. In the next slide, I just listed for you the obvious projections for Chicago. Heat waves are likely, especially because of the heat island effect in the Chicago area of so much cement, concrete on the ground. Temperatures have already risen 2.5 degrees just since 1980. So we are going to see many more days of scorching heat. The next slide will show you a couple of things, and that is the climate-related catastrophes coming from weather alone. And the insurance companies produced this to demonstrate that it's unsustainable. This just goes from 1980 to 2019, but you will see the trend, dramatically increasing since 2000. In the next slide, I just want to note that this has been so serious that the Department of Defense has begun its climate change adaptation roadmap reporting. And in it, they have said each year that climate change will likely lead to food and water shortages, to more pandemic disease, and to disputes over refugees and resources, as well as the natural disasters I've been talking about. So they too are taking it very seriously. So let's move to solutions in the next slide. And that is to say to you that we have some exciting things on the horizon that can really make a difference. Just since 2014, things have changed dramatically. Electricity from solar and wind just 7 years ago was cheaper than new coal or gas in only 1% of the world. I know that sounds amazing, but it's true. And by 2019, only 5 years later, solar and wind provided the cheapest source of electricity in 2/3 of the world. And in just 4 more years, we will see these renewable sources able to provide cheapest electricity in the entire world. That's a very important shift that we're seeing. And in the next slide, you will see new electricity capacity in the United States, that 70% of it was from solar and wind. So we're seeing a dramatic growth and a drop in the cost and an expansion of battery storage. So everywhere we look, we do see a bright future ahead. In the next slide, I also want to note that the conclusion of many consulting firms and scientists is that the economics of oil for gasoline and diesel vehicles versus renewables, electric vehicles, are in relentless and irreversible decline. That is very important when we consider the long-term plans of the transit agencies. So let's turn to buses in the next slide. 35 cities, and probably more since this came out last year, have committed to buying only zero emissions buses, starting as early as 2025. And a number of those are in northern areas like Chicago, like Oslo, and cities like Moscow. In other words, we're seeing this in all different kinds of climates. And several cities in China are already buying only electric buses. In fact, in the next slide, you will see that half of the world's buses are expected to be electric just in 4 more years. Many of them in China. United States is quite far behind, but we are on the trail to catching up. So in the next slide, I just want to note that you've already understood this, but I'm just going to list it in terms of bullet points. Why should we make this transition? It's not just for the climate or the air quality. It's because the lifetime costs are lower than those of fossil fuel burning vehicles. The lower maintenance and fuel costs are just clear for both cars and heavier duty vehicles like buses. And the payback time for them in those lower maintenance and fuel costs is anywhere from 5 to 12 years. And so that's, I mean, given that they work in similar climates and that they would improve our air quality and reduce emissions and they cost less, it just makes sense to move in that direction. So in the next slide, we do want to note that the excitement that the Chicago Transit Authority just announced that 6 new buses have begun in-service testing, and that they are planning to authorize the production of 17 more buses. And with changes that might come from the infrastructure bill, perhaps there will be even more money to do this. And Metra has just made several announcements as well. So in the next slide, you may know this, but I want to point out that in these new energy bills that are being negotiated in Springfield right now, there is a path to electrifying transportation in each of them. And that, combined with the federal money, should provide the assistance that our transit agencies need. So before I just end with what the RTA can do, in the next slide, I just want to go back to the seriousness of the crisis. We do have solutions, but we have only 9 years left to decelerate global warming before there is a tipping point, because emissions stay in the atmosphere for hundreds of years. So we can't get rid of what's already there, and we're already at 1.1 degrees of warming. We need to slow down the level of emissions enough to keep global warming to 1.5 degrees, and we're dangerously close to that. So in the next slide, actually the next couple slides, Kim and I wanted to say to you, here are some specific things that the RTA can do to move the transit agencies more rapidly to electrify, because what's critical is that they don't go to low emissions vehicles like natural gas, but no emissions vehicles. So one would be to urge the Illinois EPA to speed up the programming decisions for the Zero Emission Vehicle Volkswagen Fund. Get that money out there. It's been sitting there. It needs to be programmed. And urge PACE to purchase only electric buses in the future, because to date they have not decided to do that. The second last thing here, last slide on the RTA, is that we hope you will require, or that you can require, bus transit agencies to consider the lower life cycle cost rather than just the upfront purchase price. And we hope you could help to restructure the budget process in a way that would take these reduced operating costs into account when the agencies purchase their buses, and that you would join the efforts to work with ComEd to invest in building the charging infrastructure. So let me say, as we move to the end, last slide, I end with poetry. After the final no, if you're thinking it cannot be done soon enough, there comes a yes. And on that yes, the future world depends. This is by Wallace Stevens, and I want to urge you to say yes to this, because as you'll see in the last slide, the world depends on it, and that is a beautiful world, and we want to protect it. So thank you for taking the time to hear this, and I don't know if there's time for questions, but Kim and I are available if there are. I'm not sure, by the way, why my video wouldn't come up. I tried to start it, but it wouldn't come up. So you don't have the pleasure of seeing a real person on the screen, but I am here.
Thank you, Pam. Your slides, though, were and the beautiful pictures of Earth were perfectly clear to us. And Kim, thank you. Are there any questions for Pam or Kim, or comments this morning?
I see Director Melvin has his hand raised.
Ron, Director Melvin.
Hi, can you hear me okay?
Sure can.
Yes.
I just want to say it's an excellent presentation, and thank you for making both the humanitarian argument and the business argument. You know, this is very important, and you know, you can tell that we've already begun to work on this, but we really appreciate this excellent, succinct, to the point presentation. And I just want to say thank you.
Thanks for the opportunity.
Director Sagar also has his hand raised.
Yes, thank you, Pam. I want to say thank you very much. What an exceptional presentation that was. It was incredibly professional and very succinct and to the point. And I do believe that there is a solid across the board recognition on behalf of my colleagues on the RTA board of how important these types of future decisions are going to be, certainly for our larger transit system in northeastern Illinois, but to the global environment as well. And so we appreciate your incredible summary and presentation. I do appreciate also you being very forthright in terms of what the RTA board can do in terms of lobbying and efforts to work with our state legislature and our service agencies to make these types of decisions. I think that that's most appropriate. We always find ourselves in the vice, if you will, as we look at making capital investments and doing so with a limited amount of dollars. And so it's important that we look at the long-term investment and the long-term impact, and your reminder of that today was most appropriate. So sincere thanks to you all for a very, very well-stated presentation.
Thank you.
Director
Thanks, Dr.
Canty?
Slaughter.
Director Sager, if you could lower your hand, and Director Canty now.
Thanks, Audrey. I echo my colleagues' comments, thanking you for this presentation. And I think to Dr. Sager's point, we have a real opportunity as we're looking at this recovery program and our planning for the team to think about these issues as we go forward and think about, you know, some of these funds that are going to come our way. How can we make some decisions and seize on this opportunity to use those funds to further our efforts at decreasing our impact on global warming, et cetera. So thank you for that and reminding us of the opportunity that we have right now in front of us to start executing on some of this.
Yeah, thank you very much.
Director Andalcio.
Thank you, Pam. I also want to say this really relates to the Sustainable Development Goals. There's 17 goals through the SDGs that has been set globally for the world to follow. And I think, you know, transportation is definitely one of them. And your presentation was excellent, and it goes in line with global initiative. So thank you.
I don't see any additional hands, but I would also like to recognize Director Fuentes has joined the meeting for the record.
Great. Phil, you'll be added to the roll. Thank you, Madam Secretary.
There are no additional hands raised.
Hey, excuse me, this is Chris Melvin. May I ask one other question, please?
Oh,
Please.
certainly.
Sure. You sort of showed us what will happen to our region. Can you speak at all about other regions in the nation briefly? Is it possible?
Yes, I sure can. Well, first of all, the unusual thing about global warming and climate change is that it doesn't affect all regions similarly, meaning certain ones like ours get more rain and then periods of drought. Other regions like the West Coast will get more drought and warmer temperatures even than here, and more fires. And that is why we're seeing this incredible increase in the intensity and size of the fires in the Northwest, which are only going to increase each year. They're incredibly more destructive than they were even 5 years ago. So they are going to see increasing drought and fires. The East Coast is going to see the main impact for them, in addition to precipitation and air pollution, will be sea level rise, which is already threatening major cities on along the eastern seaboard. In fact, so seriously that there are major development plans in place to try to put a wall around the southern tip of Manhattan. And Miami Beach itself is sinking, and there's a lot of money that's going to have to be invested to try to keep the ocean out of Miami Beach. And with 2 degrees of warming, the city will be underwater. And so their concern has been about flooding and the destruction of wetlands and species. And across the southern end of the United States, where a lot of our petroleum and oil refineries are and so on, a lot of the impact, in addition to incredible species loss, will be increasing hurricanes and serious flooding that will destroy wildlife and coastal cities as well, but mainly from hurricanes, intense hurricanes, as you've seen, which are increasing in number and intensity, and heat, increasing heat. We will also see more and more climate refugees wanting to come from Central America, as will other parts of the world that are in the tropics, because they will be unable to grow crops, and the heat levels are going to be so serious that they won't be able to function. And so they will want to move north. So if we think we have a refugee crisis now, we're likely to have a much more serious one on the southern border in the future. I had slides and data on all of these, but there just wasn't time to talk about them all. But thank you for the question.
Thank you for giving us a larger context of it, because these are really, serious issues, and it's helpful to have the full story. So thank you very much for that.
Yeah, thanks for the question.
Mr. Chairman, may I cannot find my hand. May I ask a quick question?
Absolutely. Go ahead, Neil.
Thank you. I just wanted to ask Pam, in terms of other organizations that you've met with this kind of a presentation, could you just give us a brief idea of whom else you're meeting with and making the same presentation?
Yes, we made a longer presentation to PACE and have been meeting, and their observation was that because electric buses are more expensive to purchase, they are purchasing natural gas buses up until now. We also have presented and done meetings and memos with state legislators. I have met with the CTA, and so has Kim, along with others in an environmental coalition in the city. We've been, let's see, I don't know, Kim, if you're on, who else we've presented to, but we are eager to present to the RTA staff, if that is possible. And we'd like to make this kind of an educational presentation to any other group that people think would be useful.
Yeah, this is Kim. I don't have anything to add in terms of who we've presented to, although we have been in communication with, as Pam said, with PACE primarily. We've spoken with CTA. We had a meeting yesterday with somebody from CMAP, and we've spoken with a variety of different state legislators. We've also been in contact with environmental groups.
Thanks, Kim. So to Kim and to Pam, we are the financial sort of oversight wing of mass transit. So please do get together, Leanne, with our staff, show us and walk us through the long-term cost. Obviously, we're sensitive to the environmental side, aside from the cost parameters, but walk us through, how electric buses over time are actually cheaper. PACE has moved to CNG pretty heavily. How much, just for a lack of a scientific question, so CNG versus electric, how much more of a pollutant is a CNG bus than an electric bus?
Actually, considerably more of a pollutant. And Kim, do you have the percentages?
I don't have the percentages, but I'm sure we could get that information.
Yeah, I don't have them at my fingertips, Chairman, but we can get them and send them to you. It's significantly more pollution and more emissions, global warming emissions, because and in fact we're trying to get both the at the federal level to the Department of Transportation and in Illinois to change our language from using funds for low emissions vehicles to no emissions, because we're at a point in the climate crisis where we cannot afford any emissions. And so the certified, compressed natural gas buses are more expensive than diesel, less expensive than electric. But electric buses have the lowest maintenance and fuel costs. And so we think that natural gas is still a major problem. So, but we will get the specific percentage for you.
Got it. It's sort of like when I read a food label where it says lower fat, but it doesn't say it doesn't say no fat. So,
right. Exactly.
I get it.
Yeah, it's a very good analogy. But the other thing that you've got to keep in mind is the infrastructure for CNG buses means putting in place CNG fueling stations, which are very expensive. And the electric fueling station, or not fueling stations, but the electric chargers are significantly less expensive. So when you look at the total cost of the EV charging plus the buses and the reduced maintenance and fuel costs, you definitely get a cost savings, as well as you said, no emissions rather than low emissions.
Got it. Well, thank you two very much for an excellent presentation. You certainly have opened our eyes even wider, and please get together with our staff and walk us through the economics even more closely. So thank you two very much. Leanne, you have anything to add? Yes.
Director Carey has her hand raised.
Yes.
Okay.
Director Carey.
Thank you. Again, I want to echo a hearty thank you for the presentation. It's excellent, and it's right on point of where we are in the world today and the crisis we're facing. So my comment is more for us as a board and for the staff. As Leanne mentioned, we're engaged, the staff is engaged with the service board staff with looking at capital projects for 25, 26 and a framework for going forward. So I would encourage, and this is perhaps a discussion we need to have amongst the board, but I sense that there's a fair amount of support among my colleagues to address this situation. So I would say that we need to almost ask the question when we look at buying something, why are we not buying electric? Why are we not buying electric buses? Why are we not buying electric train cars? And there could be absolute reasons we can't, flip a switch and make it all happen today, obviously. But so kind of flip it, and and the service board has to defend why they don't want to buy electric. If the board all agrees with that approach. So probably more future discussion, but I would encourage Leanne and the staff, if any more presentations, more detailed presentations that would fit into your discussions of capital spending going forward, I think would be very timely, and appreciate your presenting today. Thank you.
Thanks, Director Carey. Well said. Anyone else?
That was the last of the hands, I think.
Okay, well, thank you so much, and we will continue to, to have our dialogue with you, Pam and Kim, and really appreciate your time this morning. You got us when we were all paying attention, and you got us in a good month. Let's put it that way. So, Leanne, thank you so much for setting this up. Leanne, you have anything else to add?
No, I mean, I think you covered it. And yes, I guess the only minor point that I will sort of echo something that I said earlier in my ED report, that the federal funding programs are moving in that direction anyway, with basically requirements of moving to zero vehicle emissions. And I think Pat Carey is correct. I think the interest, the commitment, CTA is already demoing vehicles, but it's not a light switch you can flick, and sort of it's more than just buying the vehicles too. It's the broader infrastructure that has to support, and the maintenance facilities and all of that. So, but certainly that's the way the programs are all moving, and I think we're very much aware. It's a large conversation that we're having, not just locally, but also within the industry as a whole. So I think we will be continuing in that conversation.
Great, thank you. Madam Secretary, were there any other requests to have public comments this morning?
We did not receive any additional requests to speak.
Okay, then we'll move on to item 6A, which is a report on the monthly financial results for February of 2021. B, it's all yours. You're still glowing in last night's White Sox no-hitter, I'm sure, as our favorite Southsider.
Yes,
B,
yes.
it's all yours. Good morning.
Morning, everyone. And I want to mention to Director Lewis that when you said it's good to be seen, the line is, it's better to be seen than viewed. All right.
I
let me
agree.
get
I agree.
started. Good morning, Mr. Chairman and directors. Today I will cover February 2021 year-to-date results. Ridership continues. Oh, next slide, please. Let's bring that up. Okay, good. Ridership continues to struggle at about 30% of pre-pandemic levels, but recovering sales tax performance and expense discipline have combined to produce satisfactory financial results. System ridership through February was 2 million rides, or 7.5% below the adopted budget, highlighted in red. Metro and Pace Suburban service results were both very unfavorable because the current budgets contain ridership assumptions made all the way back in mid-2020. The service boards will have an opportunity to update their ridership forecasts with the first budget amendment of 2021, which will be on the agenda at next month's board meeting. Next slide, please. So looking at operating revenue, total operating revenue of $206.5 million was $4.9 million, or 2.4% favorable to budget. Metro's highlighted favorable variance of $5.5 million was driven by strong ancillary revenue, more than offsetting their unfavorable fare box results. While ADA paratransit revenue was unfavorable by 41%, as only a very small amount of RTA certification trip revenue was reported for the first 2 months of the year. A total of $139.5 million in federal CARES Act funding was included in operating revenue year-to-date through February and counted towards the service boards and regional recovery ratio requirements. Next slide, please. Next, we have the public funding results. Continuing recent trends, sales tax performance continues to be better than expected. January 2021 receipts are projected to finish about 2% higher than January 2020. This would be the first year-over-year increase since the pandemic began. Recent public transportation fund results, which led the sales tax by 3 months, have also pushed CTA and Metro funding above budget. PACE funding is essentially at budget along with ADA. Total public funding currently exceeds the adopted 2021 budget by $15.2 million, or 5.9%, please. Next slide, please. System-wide operating expenses through February were $4.9 million, or 1.1% favorable to the adopted budget. Metro expenses exceeded budget by $6.1 million, driven by maintenance and fuel expenses, as some service has been restored more quickly than originally planned. PACE reported a favorable expense variance of $6.1 million, or 15.5%, highlighted in light blue, with cost savings across all expense categories. Next slide, please. The total system net result was $25 million, favorable to budget through February, as each service board reported favorable net results, highlighted in light blue. Favorable expense performance at CTA and PACE contributed to these good results, while strong ancillary revenue and public funding results more than offset Metro's unfavorable expenses. ADA's paratransit net result resulted in flat to budget through February. Next slide, please. Looking at recovery ratios, with CARES Act funding included, each of the service boards' year-to-date recovery ratio was favorable to budget. The regional recovery ratio of 55.2% finished 2.5 percentage points favorable. On the left side of this table, you can see that without CARES Act recovery ratios through February, still hovering at only about 20% for the system. In summary, the financial results versus budget are off to a solid start, but due to depressed ridership and fare revenue levels, the CARES Act, CRISA, and now ARPA funding will be needed for quite some time to keep the recovery ratio compliant and the budgets balanced. This concludes my remarks. I'll do my best to answer any questions the board may have. Back to you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, B. Any questions or comments on B's report?
I'm checking. I see Director Carey's hand is up. I don't know, is that a carryover from the last item?
Yes, it was. I'm so sorry.
No
Put it
problem.
down.
No problem. Let me take a look. I've got 43 people to scroll through, so I don't want to miss anyone. There are no hands.
Okay, great. Thank you very much. So we'll move on to item 6B, and that's the presentation of the 2021 Community Planning Program of Projects. Michael, I think you're doing this one.
Yes, good morning, Mr. Chairman and members.
Morning.
It's really my pleasure to be with you again today in this meeting. This morning, I'll be presenting and sharing with you an update on our call for projects for our community planning program. But first, I thought I'd just share a little background about the program itself, especially beneficial to some of the newer members of the board. So next slide, please. The RTA has been involved in planning communities around public transportation and encouraging transit supportive land use for 23 years now. By providing technical assistance to complete plans, as well as support to implement those plans, the work of the RTA's community planning program has encouraged municipalities in the region to develop walkable and more sustainable communities near transit stations and along transit corridors. Doing so leads to more places for people to live and work near transit, which really helps the RTA meet its strategic goals of building on the strengths of the transit system and keeping transit competitive. Next slide, please. Last year, the RTA released a report about the successful implementation of projects facilitated through the RTA's local planning group. New with this report is its format. Rather than releasing a traditional hardcover report, this version is an online story map, which is interactive and allows the user to scroll, click through visuals and maps and text that all come together and tell the story of previous year's successes. Highlights from the 2020 story map include a new TIF district in Berwyn that will support economic development near the Laverne Metro Station, new townhome infill development near the Worth Metro Station, the opening of the new Pace Park and Ride facility in Plainfield, and new residential units within blocks of the Elgin Transportation Center. In all, 10 projects in 7 municipalities were highlighted in this story map, which can be viewed by clicking on the implementation report link on our community planning webpage. Next slide, please. So this morning we heard once again about the impacts the COVID-19 pandemic has had on the region's transit agency operations and ridership and revenue. But the pandemic has also put a strain on municipal capacity, both in terms of finances and staff. So the RTA found a way for this year's community planning program call for projects to react to both the impacts on agency funding and also to municipal capacity. The program this year is reduced in size and in projects being offered. It does provide a focus really on implementation efforts of already completed plans, identifies how our technical assistance can also support pandemic recovery, and prioritizes assistance to just high need and very high need municipalities and communities. Now, projects typically offered through the program are a mix of larger planning studies and smaller projects that lend to plan implementation. But this year's offerings were reduced to just 4 categories that are generally smaller in nature and can also have an impact on pandemic recovery. Next slide, please. So I'll go through the projects, 4 project types now. The first is what we're calling active mobility and curb management planning. COVID has led to even more demand for curb space and municipal right-of-way in transit-served areas due to many factors, such as increased online shopping with curbside delivery, many people searching for ways to travel that may offer a greater sense of security or safety, such as walking and biking, and creative public gathering spaces for outdoor activities and dining. So this project type will identify creative ways to continue these trends, all while preserving space for transit services, including bus stops and transfer points. The RTA will assist municipalities to identify tactical, long-term mobility improvements, such as widening bicycle lanes and pedestrian sidewalks, identifying curb management strategies such as dedicated delivery zones or micro-mobility parking areas, and exploring how closed sections of roadway for added public gathering use could be implemented on a more permanent basis. Identifying these improvements in areas that are served by transit will further support transit's post-pandemic comeback. Next slide, please. Next up is transit-oriented development, zoning code updates, TOD zoning code updates. The need really remains to update zoning codes in transit-served areas for municipalities who have recently completed a plan through our program. In addition to the more common code updates, perhaps now more than ever, municipal codes can also be amended to define how new construction and rehabilitation can be completed so that buildings can better address social distancing, such as by repositioning or expanding common area spaces or requiring touch-free building features. Next slide, please. Special funding districts. Here we're talking about special service areas or business improvement districts or TIPs. Establishing a special funding district is a frequent tool municipalities use to finance economic development initiatives that are recommended in their plans. In addition to the traditional uses of funds generated from a special district, in some cases, these funds can also cover the costs of job training and other related vocational support that's much needed due to COVID-related job losses. The RTA will help municipalities with planning for these districts by identifying the type of district that best supports the vision of their plan, and then working to create that district. Next slide, please. And our final project type we offer this year is developer discussions. The RTA will support its local partners who struggle to attract the type of TOD development they desire by conducting half-day developer discussion workshops aimed to really refine their development strategy. With the impacts of the pandemic still unfolding, many municipalities may need to amend their strategy in attracting developers due to new social norms and development strategies. Next slide, please. So as Leanne mentioned earlier, in partnership again with CMAP, the RTA held a call for projects for the 2021 Community Planning Program from January 20 through February 3, in which we received 31 applications for assistance from 23 municipalities and community organizations. RTA staff reviewed each application, discussed each with the local municipalities, and solicited feedback on selected applications from the service boards. Applications were evaluated based on their alignment with Invest in Transit, our strategic plan, the feasibility of the proposed project, and the applicant's ability to implement the project. After reviewing each of these applications, the RTA selected these 6 projects you see here to be included in the 2021 program. They include an active mobility and curb management plan in partnership with the City of Chicago near the Kimball Brown Line Station. 3 zoning code updates, one with the City of Berwyn and 2 others with the Village of Maywood and Robbins. A special funding district with the Village of West Chicago and their metro station that's on the eastern edge of downtown. And then finally, a TOD developer discussion panel with the Village of Brookfield, focusing on municipally owned parcels that are right adjacent to their Congress Park station. The total preliminary budget for all 6 of these new projects is $278,500, which is comprised of $268,500 in RTA funds and then $10,000 in applicant local match. So after conducting a public comment period from March 17 through April 2, this meeting today is the final step in our project selection process. So staff intends to commence work on these 6 new projects starting later this spring. Next slide, please. So this concludes my presentation this morning. I'm happy to answer any questions I may be able to do so. Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. That's great. Any questions, comments? What a nice picture for Director Carey of Carey in there, or Director Sager out in the Northwest. So this is exciting, good work, and transit-oriented development and what you do is just really, really, really critical.
Director Sager has a question.
Yes, Doctor.
Michael, thank you so much for this report, and I want to commend the efforts that have been ongoing with regards to the identification and the support for the projects that are presented here today, and my best wishes to each of those communities. And my comments today are not intended to be negative. I really want that to be heard, because I think the program is an exceptional program and does provide partner municipalities and units of government with the opportunity to really move some things forward that are necessary. So it really gets to a little bit more about process. And I understand that this is a real conundrum to a certain extent, because you identify that we have X amount of dollars available to support this program, and then we look at identifying those priority areas that we are going to focus on in any given year. And that is from the perspective of the RTA, or the grantor, if you will. And while I appreciate that that helps to kind of narrow the focus a little bit, one of the challenges I would submit is the fact that municipalities or units of local government, in my opinion, are better positioned to say, you know, our needs are not going to be fulfilled within this particular thing, within this particular area. And so we refrain then from participating in a call for projects, because that's not where we find ourselves today in terms of our needs. Maybe we already have a TIF district established, for example, so that's not the type of assistance that we need. And that list can go on and on. And so I'm wondering if you can just make a couple of comments about how it is better to go ahead and identify those areas of import that we're going to address in a certain year of application process, versus just having kind of a more open process where communities say, this is our distinct need in our community relative to transit development. And so, again, that's going to sound negative. I don't mean it to be that way. I just want to see if there's another way of looking at things. Thank you.
Sure. Thank you, Dr. Sager. Great comment, and thank you for that. I think a couple of things come to mind here. One is that every year we're trying to continually revamp our program and see how we can do better, what types of changes and tweaks we can make to the program to better reflect really what's going on at the local level and with these individual municipalities. I think there's an opportunity to continue doing that, and maybe with a little more vigor or effort leading up to our next call for projects. And one strategy with that is to just pull some municipalities or all the municipalities in the region and really kind of gather more information from them as to what their needs are that perhaps we haven't yet thought of, or and maybe offer different eligible project types that could be perhaps new for the next call for projects. The second thing that comes to my mind is we do partner every year with CMAP on this call for projects, and they offer a wider array of project types that are eligible. They will work in transit served areas, of course, as well. It's not just our program. So I think between the two agencies combined, we could further expand the way we approach these two programs and how we can assist municipalities with technical assistance.
I appreciate your comments, Michael. Thank you.
Thank you, Michael. Thanks, Doctor. Any other questions or comments?
I do not see any additional hands raised at this time.
Super. Thank you, Michael, very much.
Thank you.
We'll move on to item 6C, which is an exciting tour of our new RTM's open data website. It's Pretty spectacular. Jill?
Good morning, Mr. Chairman and members of the board. Yes, we are excited to demo the site for you today of our new and enhanced RTM's website. Brad, our staff member Brad, will walk us through the site today, but we also wanted to invite any of you to follow up with us if you wanted a more extensive tour. And we're also always looking to spread the word about this resource. So if you have any groups that you think would benefit from this demo, please let us know and we'd be happy to schedule a demo virtually. And with that, I'll turn that over to Brad to walk us through the site.
Well, thank you, Jill, and good morning, everyone. And thank you for the opportunity to give you a tour of the new RTM's Open Data website. Next slide, please. RTM's is the Regional Transportation Authority's Mapping and Statistics website. It's a public website developed in-house by the RTA. It's an open data warehouse of Chicagoland's vast amount of transit information. It began nearly 20 years ago as an in-house pilot project and has been evolving ever since. It's been nationally recognized, and we have multiple contributors such as CTA, Metra, PACE, and CMAP. Next slide. RTM's contains riderships for all 3 service boards. We have a new digital document library. We provide information on all services and stations, the RTA's capital program and PMO projects, the RTA's 4 funding programs, a jurisdiction search, interactive mapping applications, a data download catalog, and the data transparency portal. Next slide. The new RTM site has a totally new look and feel. It's hosted on a much more stable environment, which is Amazon Web Services. We've added new content. We've enhanced the graphs and graphics. We've improved the ADA and mobile device compatibility, and we offer much better search and filtering options. Next slide. Next, we'll dive into the live demonstration. I'll be working along with Jerry, who will be doing the navigating, and I will do the narration. As you can see, the RTM's homepage has a totally new look and feel. Towards the top right, I'd first like to point out that we've added a global search functionality. A user can type in a topic such as sales tax and type and hit enter. And that returns all the instances on RTM's where there's sales tax. Let's go ahead and select the first option, and that is the sales tax distribution by county. This just took us to the new RTM's data download catalog. Users can preview the table and just simply click the download button, and this will allow the user to download that data set to their desktop. This functionality has always been the #1 requested enhancement for RTM's, and we're proud to announce that it is part of the new website. Going back up to the main menu and going back to the home page. On the left-hand side, we have updated our menu system. It's much easier to navigate the website now. We removed the sub-menus, which made it somewhat cumbersome. So this is a lot easier to navigate through now. Scrolling down a little bit, we have an area called the Featured Data Sets and Reports. These are links to areas of the website that are most frequently visited or have currently had updates to their data sets. To the right of that is a promotional panel, and currently we're promoting the RTA's efforts with the COVID-19 Transit Online Data Dashboard. So scrolling up, that was the home page. Let's jump into the first topic, the digital document library. And this is all brand new. RTA staff scanned, tagged, and loaded into RTM's nearly 600 documents. So now a user can go to the search panel there and type in, say, Factbook 1983. And hit enter. And RTM's returns that document. Here, a user can simply click on that link, and that opens up the document. A user can simply read it from here. They could print it from here, or they can download it again to their desktop. Going back. Let's go to ridership statistics. RTM's provides ridership statistics for all 3 service boards by mode. We also, if you scroll to the bottom, we have ridership for the entire system. This page shows a great example of the new interactive graphing functionalities that we have. A user can hover through this graph and see the data points by year and by service board. Another great functionality with these interactive graphs is that if a user wanted to see only specific content such as CTA, they can turn off PACE and Metra, and the graph reflects on what's been turned off. Scrolling down is the data table that populates that graph. And I just wanted to touch on this. In the past, users would have to select whatever lines they wanted, copy those, open up Excel, paste it, reformat it. But now with this new functionality, a user just goes through the link right above the table that's throughout the website, download. A user can click that. That takes you to the data download section, and you can simply download it to your desktop. Scrolling back up. Let's go do another example of ridership. Let's go to, let's do CTA rail summary. RTMS provides the functionality for users to toggle between a month, a year, and day of week. And RTMS will show an overview of the monthly system totals by day of week, the cross-platform system daily averages by day of week, as well as the top 10 stations for that month and year in question. Then scrolling down a little bit is another example of an interactive graph. In this case, it's a bar chart. Users can hover over each bar and see what the actual ridership figure was for that month in question and by line. So scrolling up again, that was ridership. Let's go look at routes, stations, and lines. And let's check out a PACE bus route. And here's a listing of the PACE bus routes. Let's select PACE route 208 Gulf Road. RTMS has individual profile pages for its services. This example of routes 208, we see the fare structure, the days of service, the provider, the owner, and a link to PACE's website to see the schedule for that specific route. Scrolling down a little bit, we have another new interactive graph. This is a line chart, and users can hover through each data point by day of week. And again, this is also interactive, where if a user didn't want to see weekday and only wanted to see weekend, or just see weekday and turn off the weekend, or vice versa, turn off weekend and just show weekday. So that's a great example of another interactive map. Scrolling down, RTMS also identifies any capital projects or RTA funding projects unique to that specific service. Also, just below that is the related jurisdictions section. RTMS will identify all the jurisdictions that that route in question traverses through. In this example, we identify the county, the municipalities, the congressional, Senate, and House districts, county board districts, Chicago wards, and council of mayors. Let's scroll back up and let's do one more example. Go back to the route, stations, and lines, and let's select a metro station. Another new functionality that we have is page-specific searching. So instead of scrolling through all the metro stations, we can go to the search box there and type in, say, Palatine. There you go. And here's another example of an individual profile page for a station. RTMS will have the name of the station, the line that it's on, its address, fare zone, milepost, and again, a link to Metro's website to view that station's schedule. We have a reference map of that area. Again, we have an interactive line chart. Then below that, we also have the related capital and RTA funding projects and the jurisdictions that that station in question is in. Scrolling back up. Let's go to transit projects and studies. This part of RTMS identifies the RTA's 5-year capital program. And then scrolling down, we also identify the RTA's funding programs, all 4 of them. Those are access to transit, community planning, ICE, and Section 5310. To the right, we have links to those individual funding programs. However, at the top, there's a link to view all of them. Let's click that. And this is going to be a great example of showing additional search and filtering functionality. In the search text box at the top, let's type in a town, say Aurora. And then hit the apply search. And RTMS will show the results that any project that has the word Aurora in it, RTMS identifies the year, project title, the program, project type, project partner, the budget, funding sources, and the status. Let's go ahead and click the first one, the plus sign. RTMS will then open up additional information and give you a description of that project, any current activities, and then the funding amounts by source. We can X out of that project and please click the clear search filters. Yeah. Now let's do a more advanced search. Let's go to the filter menus, and where it says program, let's select all the community planning projects that meet the funding source of federal and project status in progress. And hit apply. And we can see that 2 results are found that meet that specific criteria. It's the Cary TOD plan and the PACE Tri-State Transit Market and Facilities Assessment. Scrolling back up, please. That was an example of our new or advanced search and filtering. Let's go to jurisdictions now. And again, here's the search and filtering options for jurisdictions. In this example, let's just select a county and go to, say, Kane. Press apply. And hit the plus sign. Users have a choice to view the transit services unique to Kane County or related projects. We'll go ahead and click transit services. We can see that there are 3 metro lines, the UP West, Milwaukee West, and the BNSF. We identify the total average weekday for those lines and those stations that provide service on those lines. Additionally, below that, we can see that there are 24 PACE bus routes. And then let's go down and click related projects. And here's a listing of all the RTA funding projects that have occurred in Kane County. Scrolling back up. Let's go to the map section, please. This page shows a number of interactive mapping applications that RTMS provides. Let's go ahead and click the first one, transit-oriented development locations. This will open up a map that users can pan around and zoom into. It identifies all the TOD efforts that we've done that are either completed, in progress, or programmed. A user can click on one, say, we can click on Harvey, and the pop-up window will tell us the title, the grantee, the description, the status, current activities, and the funding. Thank you, and we can go back. That was just one example of several interactive mapping applications that we have. Let's go down to search and download data. We've been here a few times already, but I just wanted to point out this area, a user can, if they're looking for a specific data set, they can type it in the search box, or for example, let's just click the COVID-19 transit dashboard. And here you click on that and we get 3 options of data tables that populate that dashboard, and we have a README file. Users can then preview that file or simply click download and save it to their desktop. Next, let's go to the data transparency portal. This was once a standalone website, but we have since incorporated it into the new RTMS website. The RTA is required to provide information to the public to show transparency. We show information for all 3 service boards and the RTA. For this example, we can click RTA. And scrolling through, we can see a number of different data tables that we can download. I suppose we can click the first one, which is the capital project and fund expenditures. We have those broken out by year. And once again, a user can simply click preview or hit download and save it to their desktop. Can we go back to the home page now? Scrolling down to the bottom is another new functionality, or something we offer from RTMS, is subscribing to the RTMS newsletter. A user can click that, and that will bring up our subscription request, and a user can type in their email, their name, and simply hit subscribe, and they will be added to our newsletter mailing list. This is where the RTM's team is going to keep users up to date on all the new functionality and new content that's added to the website. In 2021 and beyond, we have a number of enhancements planned, and we will keep our users updated through this newsletter. Back to the homepage, please. That concludes my presentation this morning. Thank you again for the opportunity to give you this tour of the new website. We're very proud of it, and it was a whole team effort throughout the whole RTA. And I think we can open up for questions if there are any. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Well, this is going to be a very useful tool. A lot easier to use with great statistics. Any questions or comments, suggestions?
Yes, Chairman Diller, I'd like to first acknowledge that Director Cotel has joined us.
Excellent.
So
Add
we
him
now
to
have-
the official role, please.
We have full attendance. And Director Carey has a question to start.
First of all, Brad, excellent presentation and a really, really impressive product. My question is simply, how are we going about letting people know that this exists? People being counties, municipalities, economic development organizations, et cetera.
We have already reached out to all the Council of Governments. We've already done a presentation at the DuPage Council of Mayors. We are scheduling, we just started doing this. This is our second or third demo of the new website. So we're in the process of scheduling those out, and we'd be more than happy to do individual demos. If there are any recommendations of us to reach out to, we'd be happy to do that.
Okay, thank you.
Leanne had her hand up.
Let the board members speak first. I just wanted to make a quick comment at one point.
Okay, then next will be, there's a few board members, so let me just get through you one by one. Director Groven.
Yeah, actually, I should have put my hand down. Director Carey hit exactly the comment I wanted to make. So all I'll say is this is great work. This is fantastic, and the new kind of the improvements here I think should make this. There should be quite an appetite for access to this. So I'm very glad that you're reaching out to the municipalities and other stakeholders. So thank you. Great work.
Director Melvin.
Yes, thank you. Yeah, great presentation. And it looks like a great piece of work that you guys all created for yourselves. I think it's very, very interesting. And thank you all for showing us the work. I mean, it's nice to see when we allocate money that it's put to such good use. So thank you for that, and congratulations. Nice piece.
Thank you very much.
Okay, Director Carey, if you would hit your mute button, please. Okay, thank you.
Sorry.
And then, that's okay. And then we have Director Andalcio.
Yeah, thank you. My fellow directors pointed out some questions. So this definitely gives transparency, accountability, validation, verification. My question, my second question would be, who is going to maintain this data, and how frequent is this data going to be updated, and what's the process?
That's one of the most requested question about the website. It's a team effort through all the service boards, RTA staff. The website now, behind the scenes, I didn't even touch on it. This website is built on something called a content management system. So it gives us more flexibility for staff to maintain it. We also have built in some automated procedures to update our files as well to save time. And based on how numbers are being crunched at each service board, we kind of got to keep on top of them to request information so it's timely. They've done a very good job, and everyone knows that the website is only good as the latest information that's available, and they all know that, and we keep this up to date as much as we can.
Thank you, and I'm sure you have a process for validating and verifying the data.
Yes, correct. We use the exact same reports that are used by the service boards that are published as well.
Thank you so much.
Sure.
Okay, I'm looking to see any other directors have questions before I turn it over to Leanne. I
Audrey,
see
I'd like
no
to make
other
one quick
hand.
question.
I'm sorry.
Just one comment before I end. I just want to thank Jessica, Hector Sue, Hirsch Singh, and Chris Smirlo, and everyone else at the RTA that helped build this website. It took a rather long time, but we were able to do it, and we're very happy with the result.
Okay. Thanks. Leanne?
Brad just said some of the stuff I was going to say, so thanks, Brad. But the only other point that I was going to comment on, this is not a resource just for RTA staff and the service boards. As a couple of directors highlighted, it is a great resource for municipalities, elected officials, and others. But one of the great elements of this update is it is now compatible to these little devices that we walk around with on a daily basis. And I can tell you that, and Brad and crew can attest to this, I'll be walking into a meeting with someone remotely and I'll be like, hey, I need blah, 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 ridership at this station or something. And now I can self-service myself, because it used to be much more cumbersome trying to look at it from a mobile device, because the maps were really oriented towards more of and the tables were oriented much more to a computer screen. So thank you guys, just from a selfish standpoint, because I think it's hugely a wealth of information, very rich data sets in here, and they are very handy when you're going to meet with legislative leaders, elected officials, and others, because it's a great quick, grab that latest piece of information, or what are the latest projects that are going on in that area. So that's just as a quick plug to one of the additional aspects of this.
And I think, Leanne, you and myself and anybody else that goes out on the speaking circuit, and I'm doing Fran Spielman's radio show in the morning from the Sun Times, and this is part of my talking points for her. We should let people know this is available. This is a really good tool, even for just curious members of the public. There's a lot of data in here that's amazing. Anything else on this topic? So Michael and all of the staff that worked on this, excellent work. Thank you so much. Let's move on to item 6D, which is a presentation of the RTA lapsed rider survey results. And I think Hirsch Singh is going to talk to us about this.
Good morning, Chairman Dillard and board members.
Good morning.
My name is Hirsch Singh. I'm a principal analyst in the Planning and Market Development Group at the RTA. And today I'll be presenting some key findings from the RTA's non-rider and lapsed rider survey. Next slide, please. So in August 2019, the RTA board approved a contract with Resource Systems Group, RSG, for the RTA non-rider and lapsed rider survey. The survey was scheduled for spring of 2020, but was paused and then rescoped due to the COVID-19 pandemic. The goal of the rescope survey was to understand the shifting markets due to the pandemic and what could be done to encourage lapsed riders to return to transit. It is worth mentioning that this is the first survey of its kind. While there have been similar survey efforts during the pandemic, this is the first regional survey of current and lapsed transit riders. The survey steering committee included representatives from each of the service boards, CMAP, and IDOT. IDOT also fully funded this project, so I'd like to extend a big thank you to them. Next slide, please. The survey was a cross-sectional study comparing different population groups, providing a snapshot in time for 2 time periods, November 2020 and January 2021. Each of these groups were then asked about their behaviors during these periods, before the pandemic and into the future. Survey invites were sent out using service board customer lists, totaling over 60,000 email invites. This was also supplemented by additional RTA promotion. Survey data was then collected, then processed and weighted to accurately represent our region. The analysis focused on segmentation by service board and rider type. Current riders, who were defined as respondents who currently use transit at least once per week. Lapsed riders were defined as respondents who currently use transit less than once per week, but had used transit at least once per week before March 2020 or before the pandemic set in. Next slide, please. The key findings I'll go over can be grouped into 3 general themes. The first is findings we saw through research, such as some of the earlier recovery work that we've done, but now we have local survey data to confirm. Second, findings that tell us where things might be going in the future. And third, findings that tell us what transit agencies can do to encourage a return to transit. Next slide, please. Starting with findings we saw through RTA research, but now have local survey data to confirm. Significant number of transit riders stopped using CTA, Metra, and PACE altogether during the pandemic and have not yet shown signs of returning. This figure shows any use of transit by time period and by transit service. Between the first 2 time periods, before March 2020 or pre-pandemic, and November 2020, we saw significant drops in transit use for each service board and mode. Specifically, we saw large drops on rail modes when compared to bus. We also saw a minor dip between November and January, which is likely caused due to weather, holidays, and some of the uncertainty floating around fluctuating COVID-19 rates. Next slide, please. Essential on-site workers, people who identify as Black and Latino, and riders experiencing low income have been the most reliant on transit throughout the pandemic. This figure shows income by service board and rider type. If I can draw your attention to the orange bars on this chart at left, this shows the percent of respondents experiencing an annual household income of less than $25,000. For example, for PACE Bus, which are the bottom 2 bars in this figure, 51% of PACE current riders reported annual household income in this lowest cohort. This is compared to 30% for PACE lapsed riders during this time. Next slide, please. Telecommuting has increased greatly compared to pre-pandemic levels and will continue into the future. Not surprisingly, the largest increase in telecommuting was by lapsed riders. Interestingly, we also saw moderate increases in telecommuting for current riders compared to pre-pandemic rates. This figure shows telecommuting 2+ days per week by time period and by rider type. As you can see in this figure, there are 2 distinct groups: current riders, which are on the bottom of the chart, and lapsed riders, which are above. Perhaps the most important takeaway is the minor expectation for a reduction in future telecommuting for both current and lapsed rider. This basically demonstrates telecommuting's prevalence to continue into the coming months. Next slide, please. Next, we look at key findings that tell us where things might be going. Many lapsed riders do expect to return to transit, but telecommuting will limit this rebound. This figure shows the level of agreement to the following statement: I would fully return to transit as I used it before COVID-19 once the pandemic is over or all potential health concerns are alleviated. As shown in the chart here in orange, approximately 80% of lapsed riders indicated they expect to return to transit fully. However, it is important to take this finding in context with the expected increase in future telecommuting. So in total, this basically suggests that while many are stating an expected return to transit for trips they previously made, the number of trips will likely be lower than pre-pandemic levels. Next slide, please. Expectations for future telecommuting do seem to be reducing as the pandemic evolves or abates. This figure shows percent of days per week telecommuting by industry, specifically for the second wave of the survey. As you can see, there is variance in the current rates, which are shown in black for each industry type, and future rates, which are shown in blue amongst these industry categories. Another interesting point is when we compared the 2 survey waves, or over time during the pandemic, we noticed some changing rates within each industry type. anticipated future levels of telecommuting, particularly among employees employed in professional industries such as financial and business services, appear to be decreasing slightly as the pandemic evolves. This could be due to optimism around vaccines becoming available. In contrast, telecommuting by workers in mixed industries, such as government, actually increased. This perhaps suggests flexibility or ease of adaptation for those job types. Next slide, please. Skipped rather than replaced. This trend was especially true for Metra and PACE riders. This figure shows mode substitution for pre-pandemic transit trips by service board. As you can see, I'd like to draw your attention to the last line on this chart. Here you can see that approximately 70% of Metra and PACE transit trips were not shifted to other modes. Metra and PACE riders simply have forgone many pre-pandemic transit trips. CTA riders did substitute transit trips with other modes more than Metra and PACE. However, these substitution rates were still relatively low. Next slide, please. Finally, we'll look at findings that tell us what transit agencies can do to encourage a return to transit. Riders are generally pleased with Transit's COVID response and want focus to remain on vehicles, not stations stops. This figure shows preferred safety investments by rider type. Most of the respondents emphasize the importance of ventilation, mask and distancing enforcement, and sanitation on board. It's important to note that current riders were more pleased with the service board health precautions. This could indicate an opportunity for outreach and marketing on what service boards are currently doing on board. Next slide, please. When examining future investments on transit more generally, riders want to see improved speed, reliability, and connections to transportation services and geographies. This figure shows preferred general investment by rider type. Train speed and reliability rank the highest, followed by improved suburb-to-suburb transit services, other shared mobility options such as Divvy and scooters, then a seamless travel experience between CTA, Metra, and PACE. Interestingly, this point was emphasized by lapsed riders of the system as well. Lowest on the list were flexible transit, such as vehicles on call or on-demand services, and improved transit during off-peak times, such as midday, evening, late night, and weekends. Next slide, please. The survey results will be a valuable tool in step 3 of the RTA's 3-step recovery strategy, including how to prioritize our resources, marketing efforts, and most importantly, how to reinvent transit in the region in the coming years to adapt and stay competitive. This morning, you may have seen the press release on the survey. So far, we've received coverage from the Chicago Tribune, Cranes, and more. Tonight, Leanne is scheduled to discuss the results on Chicago Tonight. Her COVID update newsletter that will go out tomorrow will include a link to all news coverage for anyone that is also interested. Thank you for your time and attention. This concludes my presentation, and I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes.
I don't have the ability to raise my hand. May I speak?
Yeah, please. Thank you, Michael.
Thank you. Hirsch, I wanted to ask, it seems like this has been a survey of lapsed riders, but was there any attempt to incorporate the demand side of the equation? For example, there have been major corporations like Google and McDonald's that have made substantial investment in the city, as well as some, I think, non-discretionary employers like, say, Northwestern Hospital, or even some government agencies that really are going to have to continue to use transit. It's not a matter of if, it's a matter of when they'll be able to bring those employees back. So as you try to figure out the future, did you incorporate that information into your analysis, or was that something that was factored in?
I think indirectly some of that was factored in. We primarily focused on lapsed riders and current riders and tried to, ask the same questions and understand the behaviors and preferences between those two markets. Previously, there's been other surveys like through the Chicago Chamber that have specifically surveyed employers and tried to glean some information. We piggybacked off of some of those efforts and asked respondents about what their employers were directing them to do during the pandemic. If they were directed to stay at home or telecommute and so on and so forth. I hope does that answer your question? Or
It does, although I think that some of the employers, I guess the sense is that a lot of them are beginning to try and figure out what they should do. I think from what I've read, and there may be more on this, a lot of them are determining that while in the short run, they can't necessarily have all their employees come back over time, they'll probably look at it differently, and that could impact the demand side of transit. So that was what I was trying to get at.
Yeah, that's a great point.
And this is Leanne, just to jump in on that. As Hirsch said on the top end, this is a survey analysis. It was attempting to get real data based on, existing and lapsed riders from a rider perspective. As he sort of alluded to, we have continued and we have and will continue to maintain discussions with the business community. The chamber, as Hirsch mentioned, the Chamber of Commerce, we did do a survey that was in partnership with the City of Chicago and the chamber earlier in the pandemic. We continue that dialogue, that communication, so we can, adapt and understand sort of what future trends and thinking is. I mean, as with so many aspects of this pandemic, the impacts are sort of just happening to us. And really, the use of the transit system, the ridership, is largely being determined based on, both government sort of directives and mandates, as well as what employers are telling or asking their employees to do. And so that really dictates a lot of what happens on the transit system, and we'll continue to stay in the loop and apprised on that.
I don't see any other hands raised, Mr. Chairman.
All right. Great. Thank you, Hirsch, and everyone. That this is really interesting data that we need to be nimble on and really get on top of this and use it to put more people on our systems. Let's move on to item 7A, and that's an ordinance appointing a pension trustee. Bill Ackman.
Yes. Good morning, Mr. Chairman and RTA directors. This is Bill Ackman, Chair of the Board of Trustees of the RTA Pension Plan. Before you is a request to appoint Maddie Hemingway as a non-employee member of the RTA Pension Board of Trustees. Mr. Hemingway would be replacing a trustee appointed by the RTA Board in April of 2017, who has declined reappointment. The meeting materials contain an outline of Mr. Hemingway's professional background, but to be brief, Mr. Hemingway is a senior analyst of investments at Exelon Corporation, where he performs due diligence on new investment opportunities, conducts research on new investment initiatives, and monitors the portfolio of a $44 billion pension plan. Previously, he worked more than 10 years in financial services and nonprofit fundraising and served 8 years in the Marine Corps Reserves. Mr. Hemingway earned his MBA in finance at the Johns Hopkins Carey Business School and a Bachelor of Arts from Bloomfield College. He is active in several community organizations, including on the Chairman's Advisory of the Council of the Big Shoulders Fund, as an associate board member of the AIDS Foundation of Chicago, and on the Finance Committee of the People's Music School. I'd like to introduce you to Mr. Hemingway. He is on the call in case you have any questions about his interests and qualifications. Marty, would you please say hello? Marty was on the call. Perhaps his audio is not working.
He's muted. Hello.
Hello.
I'm so sorry. I didn't have control of my mute. I want to thank everybody for having me on this call. It's been great to listen to the RTA business, and I'm extremely honored to be even considered for this role.
Thank you, Mr. Hemingway, and thank you for your willingness to serve. Are there any questions for Marty?
Scrolling for hands. I see no hands raised. If Mr. Hemingway would mute his, oh, I'm sorry, Director Melvin has his hand raised.
Yes, Director Melvin.
Hello, Marty. How are you?
Hello.
A very impressive resume. A great background for a position like this. It looks great to me. Is there anything else we should know about you? Any comments you want to make to us so that we've got some understanding of who you are? Anything?
Well, I'm a professional investor, a personal investor. Investments and financial due diligence is something that I thoroughly enjoy, and I'm extremely excited about this opportunity.
Thank you very much. I apologize for the phone ringing in the background, but thank you very much for those comments. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Mr. Hemingway. Yeah, he's an MBA from Johns Hopkins, and also not to be overlooked, a United States Marine. So thank you for that service. Any other questions or comments? If not, can I have a motion and a second that we approve this?
Director Sagar moves and Director Ross seconds.
Thank you. If there are no other questions or comments, would you take a roll call, please, Madam Secretary?
Certainly. Director Andalcio?
Yes.
Director Canty?
Yes.
Director Carey?
Aye.
Director Colson?
Yes.
Director Frega?
Yes.
Director Fuentes?
Aye.
Director Gathing?
Yes.
Director Groven?
Yes.
Director Holt?
Yes.
Director Cotel?
Aye.
Director Lewis?
Yes.
Director Melvin?
Yes.
Director Pang?
Yes.
Director Ross?
Yes.
Director Sagar?
Yes, with gratitude.
Chairman Dillard?
Yes.
16 ayes.
Thank you. And Mr. Hemingway and Bill Ackman, thank you for going out and finding another excellent person to protect and oversee our pension investments. And Mr. Hemingway is approved, and I thank him for his service. Item 7B is a minor ordinance amendment, or excuse me, contract amendment. It's an ordinance authorizing a contract amendment with Res Publica for marketing services. And I think Tina Smith, our public relations guru, is going to brief us on this one.
Good morning. My name is Tina Bassett-Smith, and I'm the Director of Communications. So the purpose of this ordinance is to amend our contract with our marketing consultant, Res Publica Group, in order to purchase print and digital advertising that will encourage current riders and lapsed riders of the system to wear masks in stations and vehicles. And I'm happy to answer any questions about that.
Any questions on this one?
I do not see any hands.
Great. With that, how about a motion and a second?
Director Carey moves. Director Andalcio seconds.
Thank you. Madam Secretary, will you please take a roll call?
Sure. Director Andalcio,
Yes.
Director Canty,
Yes.
Director Carey,
Aye.
Director Colson,
Yes.
Director Frega,
Yes.
Director Fuentes,
Aye.
Director Gathing,
Yes.
Director Groven,
Aye.
Director Holt,
Aye.
Director Cotel, Director Cotel,
Aye.
okay. Director Lewis,
Yes.
Director Melvin,
Yes.
Director Pang,
Yes.
Director Ross,
Yes.
Director Sager,
Yes.
Chairman Dillard.
Aye.
16 ayes.
Thank you. And that amendment to that contract is approved. Item 7C is the approval of some travel reimbursement expenses totaling about $200. Any questions or comments on those? If not, I'll entertain a motion in a second.
I'll make a motion to approve.
Okay, Director Frega moves and Director Groven seconds.
Thank you. Madam Secretary, will you take the roll call on those travel reimbursement expenses, please?
Sure. Director Andalcio,
Yes.
Director Canty,
Yes.
Director Carey,
Aye.
Director Colson,
Yes.
Director Frega,
Aye.
Director Fuentes,
Aye.
Director Gathing,
Yes.
Director Groven,
Aye.
Director Holt,
Aye.
Director Cotel,
Aye.
Director Lewis,
Yes.
Director Melvin,
Yes.
Director Pang,
Yes.
Director Ross,
Yes.
Director Sager,
Yes.
Chairman Dillard.
Yes.
16 ayes.
Thank you. And that 7C is approved. Thank you very much. Next is item 8, and that's new business. Any new business to come before the board today?
I do not see any hands raised.
Okay. So as a reminder, the next scheduled meeting date for the RTA board will be next Thursday, May 20th for next month. Thursday, May 20th, beginning at 9 o'clock. We'll see where we are in this virtual world of COVID-19, but my guess is we will still be online here. But May 20th is the next meeting beginning at 9. Before I entertain a motion to adjourn, Nadine, you want to say anything on our board of directors training, or what do you want us all to do?
I think everyone will probably appreciate a 5-minute break, and then we will convene for the training.
Great, thank you. So with that, if there's no further business to come before the public session of the board of directors, I'll entertain a motion in a second to adjourn.
Nobody wants to leave.
I'll make a motion
Director Gathing moved and Director Groven second.
Okay, great, thank you. With that, we'll sort of reconvene for some board training after this, but the public meeting of the board of directors is hereby adjourned. Thank you, everyone, very much.
Mr. Chairman, do we need to take a vote on our adjournment, please?
All those in favor say aye, even though.
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? So that passes, Madam Secretary, and we can leave this meeting and go on to our next one in about 5 minutes. Thank you so much, everyone.
Thank you, everyone.